Hey paisanos, are you ready for an awesome romp through the 80s? Yeah, no, if you listen to the last 3 episodes on Ready Player One, you know why we're here.
Socrates is rumored to have said that the unexamined life is not worth living. To which his student, a young Plato, is rumored to have replied, "That isn't a very nice thing to say about Ernest Cline." In a younger and more innocent episode of Words About Books, I likened Ready Player One to hell. Ready Player 2 is not hell, where its predecessor fanned my flames of rage and raised deluges of cringe. Ready Player 2 elicits only pity. Ready Player 2 exists in the seconds following the fatal mistake and immediately before the final blow. That moment where the brain casts reality aside and attempts through sheer force of will to turn back time and make it so this thing is not so. Ready Player 2 is the rage of a fallen angel as he plummets from grace, swearing vengeance on the low creatures of the earth. Ready Player 2 is the desperate plea of the gambler, watching his children's future move slowly to the other end of the table, shouting, "One more round, double or nothing," as his fellow players look on and shake their heads. Ready Player 2 is an empty house that was once filled with love and laughter, never to return. Ready Player 2 is the final blissful gasp of a drowning man that fills his lungs with water and ends his struggle. But more than anything else, Ready Player 2 is the journey of a man named Ernest Cline as he struggles to be worthy of his dreams and his subsequent discovery that he is, and always will be, inadequate to that task.
Oh god, so where do I begin?
Where do you begin?
I did some breathing exercises. I laid down and I just relaxed my muscles. I ate a really nice burger and I hugged my daughter and my wife before coming to record this fucking
I looked
episode.
at everything that was good in the world. I watched the sunrise. I saw birds in flight. And I thought maybe everything will be okay.
I guess I have to preface it just like we did last time. This isn't an attack on the reader.
This is an attack on Ernest Cline.
Yeah, exactly. This is an attack on the author. Yeah. This is not an attack on the reader. If you like Ready Player 2, good for you.
You shouldn't, but I'm okay with that.
Yes. I actually think that I understand why people like the first one, even though I do not. I do not understand people who like this one. I don't.
I have not met anyone who likes this one, so
I've seen some reviews,
I
don't get it.
I did know people who liked the first one, and I have talked to people online who liked the first one. And those same people all agreed that they had no idea what he was doing with this one. They didn't like it. And I want to be clear about a couple of things. I did see in some of the reviews that people didn't like it because Ernest Cline got woke. He didn't.
No, he did not.
And
absolutely
two,
not.
If the reason you don't like this is because Ernest Cline doesn't absolutely hate trans people, you can just fuck off. This podcast isn't for you.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
That's not what's wrong with this.
I want to talk about that when it comes to it, because I think it's wrong, but not because he included trans people, but because how he handled it. I think I can go into depth on that one. Okay,
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
but it's not. I've seen some reviews that was like, "Oh, he included trans people. He's giving us leftist propaganda." No, he's not. No, he's not. Absolutely not. Incorrect. You do not understand what a leftist even is, I don't think.
He doesn't have, first off, and we talked about this with Race in Ready Player One, he doesn't have the most enlightened opinions on any of these things. All he has basically said
Or on
is...
women.
Well, yeah. But I think all he basically says in this book is, I don't hate those people. And I'd give him that. I don't think he's transphobic, but I don't think he broke barriers. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. If that's why you don't like it, fuck off. But
Exactly. I did see a review that said the way I rate books is by how quickly I can consume them, and I was like, that's a weird choice of media for you, because books are very slow to consume versus things like movies and video games. I don't think books are the best medium for you. And also, that person even acknowledged, like, this book wasn't all that great, because I will say one of the very, 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 very few things that the first book had going was that stuff was happening.
It was a book.
It was paced in a way where you can say stuff happened. It was not a particularly well-written book, but things were happening. We had an underdog protagonist who we were supposed to root for. He was awful, but that's, whatever. And he was doing things, and he was fighting an evil corporation to get a good corporation. There's a lot wrong with the first book, but the pacing was fine. I cannot
It was
say
better.
that about this book.
Well, okay. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we're dividing this discussion into 3 parts, like the book is divided into 3 parts.
Yes, even though his third part in this book is like 4 chapters.
That's okay, because I think
don't-
there's going to be a lot of final thoughts.
I 100% agree with you. I completely agree. There's going to be a lot of shit that we have here.
I think we're going to focus this part only on the first part of the book and sort of the initial setting up of the discussion.
Yeah.
Now, the thing I got to say is when we're talking about pacing, in relation to part 1 of the book, it is not a story. It is not a narrative.
No. Part 1. Oh my god. I wrote down. Hold on. Let me find that real quick. The plot starts at page 121. I'm not joking. I am not joking at all. The villain comes in at page 121 to give the hero the quest that he has to go on, or people will die. Everything before that is some setup and some really problematic shit along the way.
If you could imagine, you know how sometimes, like the opening crawl of Star Wars, how the opening crawl of Star Wars drops a minimal exposition on you that tells you sort of where we're at and what's going on as the movie opens. The first 120 pages are open and crawl. They are written like open and crawl. And I mean, I'm not even saying this to knock the book. This is just objective. They are not written like a narrative. It is just Wade telling you what has happened in the time since the last book. And he's not telling it like a story. He's just listing facts.
Oh, yes. Ernest Cline is not a good writer, and
he's gotten worse.
I was going to say there's like 8 years between books or something like that, and you would expect him to get better and to hone his craft, and it is so much worse now.
Well, let's talk about what happened in real life, because I have been telling you, you get very angry when you read this.
Oh my God, I was so mad at so many points. So let me tell you real quick. I was told by like YouTubers and sources like that were like, he fixed some of the problems of the first book and made a whole new set of problems for this book. That is incorrect. He did not learn anything after the first book other than what Daddy Spielberg told him.
Well, and let me talk about that. If you haven't listen to our first series on Ready Player One. Please go back and do that. But one of the things that you really need to know about Ernest Cline, and I think the only way to get anything out of Ready Player Two is to read it as a book written by Ernest Cline. It is the process of Ernest. Like, I'm reading this to learn about Ernest Cline. He is the secret main character to me. And Ernest Cline spent the beginning part of his career trying to be a screenwriter, but he couldn't sell anything. And so finally he sold a novel, which was Ready Player One. And that got made into a movie by Steven Spielberg, legendary director of wonderful 80s movies. And that was just the top of the world for Ernest Cline, I'd have to imagine.
That was his peak.
That was he calls, I think I mentioned this in the first episode. In interviews, he calls him Steven. And they're on a first name basis, he and Steven. And
oh, God.
They talk on the phone. I'm sure Steven Spielberg anxiously awaits Ernest Cline's every phone call. And they just can't wait to get together on another project. So obviously, Ernest Cline, being a huge fan of films, particularly Spielberg's films, having a Spielberg movie made based on his material, which, by the way, the movie changes virtually everything.
Yep.
And he now can relive his dream of making movies. And they didn't want him probably to write just a screenplay for them to adapt. They wanted him to write another book and see if it did well. And then if it does well, they'll do what they did with the first one, where they get somebody who can write a screenplay to come in and finish the screenplay based loosely on what he set out. And so this is not even, like we said, Ready Player One, the key problem is it lacks a soul, it lacks a heart. It's just a series of tropes and references that I think should be borderline illegal. I think it's borderline copyright infringement.
Yes.
But this lacks even that faintest of spark, because it is purely...
I actually got the impression he cared about the first book, even though it was very poorly written, and
it was at least something he liked.
Yes.
This
I don't get the
is a
sense
means
he
to an
cared
end.
about this book. Yes. I think he just wrote this book so that he had another book so that maybe Daddy Spielberg and him can make another movie.
All of this is. I do not think there was a Ready Player 2 ever in his mind.
Nope.
And I'm sure he did talk to Spielberg about doing another movie, and Spielberg probably has inputs. Steven Spielberg is legendarily schmaltzy and just like fan servicey, and all his storylines get wrapped up nice and neat in a little bow.
Right.
And there's all this human emotion, which is totally the opposite of everything Ernest Cline writes.
Yeah.
Which to date,
there's no human emotion. This book is just so cold and lifeless.
I think Spielberg told him, Wade is not a good guy. He's not
likable.
Someone we can root for. He's not Elliot in E.T. He's not Quint from Jaws. He's not. There's nothing about Wade that audiences can really get behind as written. Wade has a lot of problems, and they're not flaws. They're basically, he's kind of a bad guy.
Yes.
And I don't think Ernest knew that. We talked about that in the first series.
Absolutely agree. He thought Wade was a likable person with maybe a few flaws, but he
if
did
not likable,
think,
relatable.
Yes, he did not think Wade was bad.
No.
But he is.
And there's this strange undercurrent that pervades Ready Player 2, where Wade is wrong, but is he?
Yeah.
But you can see where he's coming from, right? Like it doesn't want to admit it. whatever he was given advice, I am sure. And I am sure he took it because he doesn't give a shit about his vision. He has no vision. His vision is, I want to make another movie. And so I will write whatever you need me to write to make another movie. But you can tell there's a little bit of clapping back at his own haters via Wade.
Absolutely.
There's a little bit of, yes, obviously Artemis is right, but isn't she also kind of a spoiled yuppie goody two-shoes who doesn't really know what it's like? She's right, but she can only afford to be a good person because she didn't have to see the horror I saw growing up as a poor young white man in Columbus, Ohio. He
grew up in Oklahoma, sir.
I don't give a fuck where he grew up. So it's just constantly like, he knows Wade is wrong.
You called it, we're seeing cognitive dissonance in real time.
Yeah, he knows Wade.
He can't admit that people see these things that Wade does as really problematic, and why.
No, and it's going to boil down to basically Ernest Cline has a different morality, and I don't respect it. I do not respect Ernest Cline's values. And that's why I said at the beginning, it's kind of hard not to make this a personal attack on Ernest Cline, because the things he thinks are relatable, I would say if you relate to them, you need to seek therapy. So let's jump into it, because this is just going to be, this first part, it's just going to be sort of a series of examples, because like we said, there's really not a lot to summarize here.
Yeah. Do you want to do it like last time? I'll summarize and you jump in.
Yeah, if that's how you'd like to go. If you want to relive it.
Yeah. I don't. But you know what? I read this fucking book. And the only way I'm going to be able to move past it is to tell you, the listener, exactly how much it sucks, and also, importantly, why. Do I need to do any sort of recap for the first book?
The brief recap I will give is that there is a simulation called the Oasis, which is kind of like a Second Life style video game, but
it's basically the internet now.
Yeah.
Plus a video game.
Yep. Yeah, it's basically the metaverse. It's Facebook. It's what Facebook wants the metaverse to be. People spend all their money in there. They live their whole lives in there. They do their jobs in there. They go to school in there. And there was an evil corporation that was trying to take it over when the original founder died. The original founder had a contest where he wanted to find a successor who was exactly like himself in every way, which in a bizarre lack of any kind of self-reflection meant that they were essentially experts in 80s trivia. And that was their only qualification. So Wade and his friends became experts in 80s trivia. They won the contest. They became the richest people in the world overnight. They now own the company that's in control of basically the entire world infrastructure and economy.
Yep.
And these are their stories.
Yep. And yeah, that's where we're at. The one thing that Wade maybe had going for him in the first book was that he was the poor underdog. And that's gone now. He is the richest person in existence. He has basically total control over the internet. And he owns the most prosperous company on the planet.
Gregarious Simulations or something. What is it called?
GSS, Gregarious something Simulations. I don't care. I don't even remember if he mentions what it was actually called in this. Just GSS. But he also buys IOI, which is like the competitor, which, yeah. And he's basically also the U.S. government, because the government has collapsed, and he's propping it up with money. And for some reason, they also paid off the national debt. And I don't think Ernest Cline realizes that in the post-apocalyptic nuclear world that he forgets he actually wrote, I don't think anyone gives a shit about the national debt. If roving bands of bandits are patrolling the wastelands, everyone's poor, and nukes wiped out countries.
Remember how he had to take an armored bus to get to Columbus in the first one?
Yes.
Because they might be attacked by land pirates?
Yes.
I have to say that This was a problem in the first one. It is a larger problem in the second one.
It was a problem in the first one because H was driving around in an RV.
Okay. I
don't think he remembered how poorly he portrayed the world that everyone inhabits.
Okay, here's the deal. We run a book podcast that is, I would say, light in tone, if not humorous. And so often when we read these books, like Thrawn, I make fun of all the little nitpicky things and inconsistencies, like Anakin forgetting he has the Force or something like that. Every book does this. Every movie does this. I don't actually dock that many points for it in my personal life. I don't really mind if you take a liberty or two. You kind of have to make a story move. And real life's weird like that sometimes. Who knows? Problem is, in Ready Player 1 and now Ready Player 2, it is almost like a 1-2 beat of say a thing, contradict a thing.
Yep.
The world is shit. The population is booming. The United States government is borrowing money from other countries to keep itself afloat. Who? Who is able to prop up the world's largest economy when the world's largest economy fails? Who survived that and came out with money to lend? If Wade is the government, who is suing him all the time?
Yep.
On one hand, he will say, I run the Oasis. I'm basically superior to any elected official because I have a literal button that could shut off the world economy and all global communications in an instant.
Yep.
And yet, the next breath, he will say he's being sued by a bunch of people and that he is worried that bombs are going to start flying and we're going to nuke ourselves or we're going to build robots, but also there's 10 billion people in the world and the environment is about to collapse because of how many people we have, but also it's a giant wasteland where there is no food, and also Japan is empty, and it goes on.
They have the energy to power people going onto the internet in this virtual simulation for 12 hours a day a pop, but they're also burning out all their fossil fuels.
I imagine the way that this was written was, it is a post-apocalyptic setting. The first one wanted to play with the idea of many popular 80s movies that the environment was going to collapse and that apathy and warfare was going to just sort of destroy the world.
Well, like you said in the first episode we did, you said that it's very obvious that Ernest probably had part 1 of the first book kicking around his head for a while, and then he probably had the ending in mind, and then the rest was kind of written as he had to sit down and finish up the book. So it's incongruent because, like I said, H is driving around in an RV. No one ever attacks her RV and kills her, even though there are land pirates patrolling the wasteland.
Well, no, in this one,
you could power a space heater and your internet rig and a laptop with 15 minutes of exercise on an exercise bike. But we're having trouble with energy.
We used all the fossil fuels, yeah.
Yeah.
There's another particularly egregious part of this where he writes it as if it is taken for granted that we are in a world on the brink of collapse. But also, whatever modern political or topical issue pops into his head as he's writing, he just inserts as a one-off sentence.
Yep.
There are multiple references to things like YouTube's problems with fair use and Twitter's moderation challenges with free speech versus responsibility. He'll constantly, like, anytime some little technological thing pops into his head, he'll write a one sentence, one off, and then we did that. It's an attempt at making the world seem authentic, but there's problems, and we talked about this in the first book. Is this world diverged from our world when?
2012 or 2013 was when the Oasis came out, but it seems like culture probably stopped in like the mid 2000s.
Yeah.
There's only one new property that was invented by Ogden Morrow, one of the inventors of the Oasis, and that's it.
Yeah.
There's nothing else.
We
and Sword Art Online.
And this is where I'm going with that, is they reference Studio Ghibli and anime, Sailor Moon. I think he drops a lot of anime stuff in this one. And it doesn't make sense to me. Like, when did we diverge? When do the land pirates come in? When does the nuclear war come in? When does the famine come in? I understand we are sitting here in 2022. We just had a global pandemic. It wasn't good. Pretty bad, actually. It might lead to a recession. But land pirates. We're not quite there yet.
Yeah, we're no.
I'd wager we're not quite even close to there yet. So
not even a little bit.
Something much worse must have happened. So I think the timeline
they're in
already
like the 40s or something, right? 2040s.
Yeah. So how do we get in 20 years? Do you
land
think
pirates and nuclear war?
Yeah. Well, and how then does the world's population, amidst a nuclear war,
boom,
reach 10
how do we have
billion?
an overpopulation crisis? Question mark.
I could
like you
see
said, Japan has an underpopulation crisis, but then in
and
like
that was
the next chapter they mentioned that we've solved the overpopulation crisis.
That's actually
like
a good point. That's actually a great one to bring up, where Japan currently does have a rapidly aging population and a rapidly declining birth rate. And that is a problem for Japan. But if there are 10 billion people in the world, then it's not really so much like Shoto says he has to get married and have a kid at 18 because Japan is facing a population crisis. Well, Japan might just have to let some non-Japanese into Japan. And that's
dare.
Well, and this is the thing
you would
where
even say such a disgusting thing.
If you just read a headline, which is exactly what happened here.
Yep.
I just read one headline that says Japan has an aging population and a declining birth rate, and that is of an economic concern. Now, what Japan has done to address this is they have started opening up to immigration. They are allowing a lot of people from the Philippines, for example, into Japan. And it is a lot like immigration here. They fill those roles that the native population does not or just will not do. And it seems to me, in a world with 10 billion people, I'd imagine many of them are located in, the Asian continent. They could go to Japan and they could fix that. We don't need Shoto to have a child at 18 if he's not ready to.
No, he needs to do this. He needs to do his duty because he's a celebrity now.
I'm not saying that Ernest Cline is anti-immigration or
no.
But there is a troublesome
doesn't
undercurrent.
Understand.
Yes, and
he
that's
doesn't
going to
understand. He's just throwing out. I mean, he doesn't understand the culture he's parodying. He sure as shit doesn't understand the problems of the world.
Yeah, he didn't understand. He basically exotified and tropified Japanese culture in the first one to an offensive degree.
God. Oh my God. Let me just re-emphasize. Shoto and Daido, they're named after Japanese swords. They called him Wade-san, and they bowed to him all the time.
I think it was like, oh, honorable Wade-san.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And in this book, he completely rinsed that out. Shoto's a different person now.
Yeah, so the way you get rid of your exotification is to engage in erasure. It's one or the other.
Yeah, Shoto has no real
just like
distinguishing features now.
Hire a Japanese sensitivity reader or just go to Japan. You're with your Steven Spielberg money, or
I actually expected him between the books to have gone to Japan and figured it out. I was expecting more from him, and I was sorely disappointed.
Oh, it's not that different shit.
Yeah.
Oh, there's not hikikomori on every block. And like hikikomori is the greatest problem facing Japan. That's the other thing. They all start these wonderful charities to like end world hunger and address global warfare in impoverished nations. And then Shoto starts a foundation for the hikikomori. And it's like, you're all hikikomori. Every single one of you is a hikikomori.
Except
It's
Artemis. Artemis grew and changed. The story really should have been about her.
Yeah,
I can imagine that hikikomori is a huge problem in Cline's world, but it seems to be a problem that they're fueling, not fixing. They're contributing actively to the problem.
Well, Wade is a hikikomori by definition.
Absolutely. He was in the last book too.
I don't want to talk about hikikomori. We could get lost in everything.
Oh my God, yes we can. And we, just like this book, we have not even started on the plot. So, okay. Let's reintroduce the main characters. You got Wade, who is an Ernest Cline stand-in. You got Shoto, who changed his name to Shoto, so I don't even have to try and remember his real name. And like we said, he used to be stereotypically Japanese, and now he's just a blank slate, basically. He is no different from H, who is a black lesbian woman who also has renamed herself H after her avatar. And then there's Artemis, who does go by Samantha, which is her real name. And they're basically Wade's two sidekicks and his love interest. There's also Ogden Morrow, who is Halliday. He's the one who made the Oasis. Ogden Morrow is the former partner of Halliday, and he is hardly ever brought up in this book. Very, very little dialogue. Ernest seems to want to avoid dialogue wherever possible in this because that would require, like, characterization.
Well, the screenwriter will take care of that.
Yes. It feels like he purposefully tries to avoid any sort of dialogue. So, Wade, after...
Well, of importance, we did forget to mention that Ogden Morrow was married to Kira, a mutual friend of his and Halliday's.
Yeah, Halliday, turns out he wanted to fuck my wife. Like, he wanted to kidnap her before we got married, and, like, yeah, he wanted to just go to town on her. But he never expressed his feelings, so, like...
That is not... okay, I do have to defend... That is not what he said. Yeah, basically, Halliday was like, I'm obsessed with your wife. She should have married me instead of you. And Ogden was like, okay, well... I don't think we can continue a friendship now that that's out there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And then Halliday spent the rest of his days obsessing over Kira.
Wade, at the end of the last book, a bunch of people died so that he could get the Easter egg, which would give him all the money and power. And then he also then got to have... He met Samantha in person for the first time, and he was really relieved that she was, in fact, a woman. And then they proceeded to have very, very, very loud sex, apparently. And they dated for a whole week in person, and then she went home. And during that time, Wade found what Halliday left for him called the ONI, but I'm going to call it Oni, because fuck you. And
Well,
that...
He mentions it's Oni. He talks about how he knows it's a Japanese demon.
Yeah, but he said it's pronounced ONI specifically. And he's wrong. It's pronounced Oni. You are incorrect in your own book.
So I've grouped... I have a series of quotes. This is me interrupting you.
Okay.
I have a series of quotes. I basically have an average of 3 highlights per page.
Because just everything is fucking wrong.
I've grouped them into several categories. One of the categories of quotes I have is the constant reminder that Halliday will have gifted a technology that is an existential threat to humanity to a child whose only qualification is that he won an 80s trivia contest.
Yep. Halliday says at the end of the last book, hey, maybe go outside sometimes. And my response was, fuck you, Ernest. Fuck you, Halliday. That you can't tack that on and have that be the theme of your book. Fuck you. So
Wait. I have another quote. This reminds me.
Yeah, let's go for it.
I don't know if I copied it. Let's see. I think I filed this one under Wade is one of the worst human beings imaginable, and that is relatable to the author.
Okay.
So it was... here it is. Yes. Deep down, I still shared Holliday's opinion that going outside was highly overrated.
Yeah. Yeah, I suspect that when people said Wade was awful, Ernest was like, okay, I guess he should have an arc. I'm going to make him worse, and then something, he'll have an arc and be better at the end. And he forgot the something part where Wade fucking changes, as we will see, as we go along with this. But Wade, despite being horrible in the first book, is so much worse just in this first part alone.
So what does the ONI do?
So yeah, let's get back to that so we can get back to Wade being shit. So the Oni, which is what I'm calling it, it straps on your head and it sends you into the oasis, but you can feel it. You can smell it. You can taste it. You can't seem to feel pain, but otherwise it's like you're there, Ben. You use your brain to be there, Ben.
You know what a better writer would have done?
Not written the book and cut his losses.
No, just this is a very easy thing. He goes in to the oasis and he does that trick where he bites his tongue or pinches himself or whatever. And he does feel pain. And you can feel pain in the oasis. And that's foreshadowing that this is both very good but potentially dangerous.
Well, the author wants you to know that it is 100% good. We answered
That's
the
actually
question
one
of
of
the
my
Oni.
categories.
Yeah.
Another one of my categories is the Oni is an objective good and all arguments to the contrary are either a legitimate concern about the implementation and rollout specifically, or they are utterly invalid.
Or, yeah, straw man arguments
Yes.
abound. So Wade decides to put this thing on his brain. He didn't know if it would work, but I guess Halliday's a super genius, and so he was pretty sure that he wouldn't, like, die when he put this on or be put in a
Besides,
coma.
I wasn't worried about the ONI being dangerous. If using the headset was potentially harmful, Halliday would have warned me.
I also...
This is the same Halliday who
also-
started a contest in which your entire family was blown up.
Yes, I also highlighted that and put a note in, very similar to that. Halliday was a fucking jerk. He wasn't going to say shit. So
Halliday was a sociopath.
Yeah. Yeah. He was awful. he was objectively a sociopath.
He 100% would kill you.
Into the Oni he went. Wade experienced everything. I thought it was like, okay, why can you experience all this stuff? Because this is a coded world still. Like,
Oh, another thing before we get to that. I enjoy interrupting you. This is fun.
yeah, yeah.
I have another note. Where the ONI device was hidden is the last place you would ever look for a nerd's secret treasure. It was
Inside
hidden
of his vault.
It was hidden in Vault 42 of 8675309. You get it? Because that's like that dumbass song. Okay, so sorry. How much further were you gonna go?
Oh, well, I was going to have that Samantha comes back and is upset because she thought Wade wanted to spend time in the real world with her, because apparently she did not read the first book, where even at the end, Wade didn't care to abandon his stupid-ass let's build a rocket ship and flee the planet plan, but he was willing to put it on the shelf so that he could have sex with her.
But he did lie to her about it.
Yeah, he didn't even lie to her. I think she
No,
was
he
like,
specifically hid it from her, and then when she found out, she yelled at them all.
well, yeah, he did hide it from her in this book. But last book, Ben, at the end, she said, you don't want to get on your rocket ship anymore? And he was like, well, yeah, kinda, but like, yeah, we could hang out instead. I'll do anything to be with you. I think he said almost those exact words, where it was like, it's very clear he's still all ready to get on a rocket ship and fucking abandon the planet like a jackass. But like, if he gets laid first, maybe he'll put that plan off for a little bit longer.
Well, there's two things I have to say about this. One of them is that Ernest Cline is doing a last Hail Mary to get you to like Wade, where he now is saying that Wade is autistic.
He does bring... It's really weird, because he brings that up very out of nowhere to say, like, oh, I don't get social cues, and I get really
I don't get
worked
social
up around
cues,
other
but
people.
I have mastered lying to my girlfriend.
He was not autistic in the first book, and he's not
No.
autistic for most of this book, but he put in a few lines that suggest he might be autistic, so that you can't be mad at him.
No. He's not. That's what Ernest Cline is trying to tell us, that we were wrong to hate Wade. We ignored the obvious signs of his neurodivergence.
Incorrect.
And
he was not autistic in the last book, and I
No,
wouldn't be
see,
surprised if he forgot that.
he has difficult times interpreting social cues, and that's why he's such an asshole. Except when he can very clearly interpret the social cue of, my girlfriend would stop having sex with me if I told her about my spaceship. He can very clearly interpret when she's starting to get mad, and when he watches the playback, he has no trouble interpreting the very moment that she stopped loving him.
God.
But then he
Can we
punches
talk
himself in
about
the
that?
head when he gets anxious again. So that's
Yeah.
which he's
He
never done
did that
before.
Never.
Even though his life has been in danger multiple times, he watched people die in front of him. Never once exhibited anything other than a quick plan to get the hell out of Dodge.
So yeah, let's bring that up real quick, because I think this is Spielberg influence, okay? Because they talk about the indentured servants that Wade didn't give a flying fuck about in the last one, and actually started to hate because he was mad that the other indentured servants at IOI were like trying to just live their life as best they could when they should be doing what Wade did and hacking his way out of there, man. But in this book, he buys IOI and he frees all of them. And he suddenly starts thinking about his mom, which is something he only briefly mentioned in the first book, as she died of a heroin overdose. And he also briefly mentions his aunt and his neighbor, both of which died in an explosion meant for him that he didn't give a flying fuck about them and never thought about them again in the first book. But suddenly he's like, oh, I'm really sad about that.
Yeah, Steven told me that somebody with feelings would probably be traumatized by that.
Yeah, Steven told me that it's a really bad look for Wade to see people dying for him and for him to just not care. And that's the other thing. The Oasis is a permadeath, okay? So if you die, you lose all your stuff, and you invest real-world money into it. So if you die, you lose pretty much
You're
all of your
bankrupt.
capital.
Yeah.
And at the end of the first book, a shitload of people died for him in a giant explosion, and Wade decided to fuck his girlfriend on a big pile of money, and Daddy Spielberg said, hey, he should probably, like, bring those people back. And so in this book, he brings those people back and gives them back all their stuff.
Yeah, and these are fine things to mention. The thing that burns tons and tons of page time, because this was the other thing I was going to mention alongside Wade now being neurodivergent, is Ernest Cline fancies himself a sci-fi writer. And he constantly tries to explain the detailed, like, motives and technical jargon behind every little thing. One of the things that gets me is there is probably, like, I don't know, a good 5 to 10 pages or it feels that way. Maybe I could be exaggerating. A lot of words, though, dedicated to explaining how Halliday developed the simulation stuff in secret. And it's like, but why? Like, he talks about how he developed it in secret and how he, did this company that developed neural implants for the disabled, but secretly he was using those implants to gather data about the brain so that he could then train machine learning algorithms to interpret the signals from the brain, and then he could eventually take what was an invasive surgery and make it a non-invasive headset that would interpret signals from the brain and allow it to communicate with the machine, which is the stated mission of Neuralink and a dozen other companies. Right now, there are companies that, like, he pulled that off of a news article about Neuralink. That is exactly what they do, and that is exactly what they intend to do. And they use that to raise funding. Like, one day this is going to be commercial technology available to everyone, and it's not going to be an invasive surgery.
Yeah, but he didn't think about that in the first book, and he needed to figure out, how can I get this in here? How can I have Halliday give me one more invention? And boy, he gives him 2 inventions, Ben.
That's called foreshadowing.
It feels like he's trying his best to anticipate the criticisms that people like you and I are going to level at him when this book comes out. We're gonna want to know how he developed this and nobody ever knew about it.
Right.
But again, it's just he's incapable of putting himself in another person's shoes and analyzing the types of things they would have a problem with. And the type of thing I have a problem with is 10 billion people and nuclear war. How does the population go up during the world's largest war? But no, instead of thinking about, like,
tell me about your stupid implant.
Tell me why he hid a thing. So he hid a thing because he didn't know if he wanted to release it. That's the motive, I guess. But the very simple statement would be, I didn't release it because it didn't work. And that could be a lie. Maybe it did work. But yeah, there's been a shelved project for this whole thing, and then the thing he reveals is to his successor is, we figured it out, and then we realized, this is going to be a big problem. So I decided to wait until I was dead and then give a child who won a trivia competition access to this technology that could destroy the world.
Yeah. Well, Ben, so we should mention to the reader, you're about halfway through the book right now. And fact is, it's not going to surprise you at all. And I've already told you enough, so it's like, whatever. It gets worse, Ben. It gets worse.
I believe you.
By the end and the epilogue, okay? So you just put a pin in this, he had secret technology he developed, because that's going to come up again at the end of the fucking book, okay?
Okay. We'll leave that as like a teaser.
So,
though
Samantha,
many of the technologies he thinks are going to blow my mind and surprise me are just technologies that people are working on today for very obvious reasons.
Wade makes a big deal. He goes into excruciating detail. The Oni scans your brain. It scans a backup file of your brain to the servers at GSS without telling you or you having the consent. And if you wear it for more than 12 hours, you will die a horrifically painful death. But it allows you to experience and record things that you can be a man having sex with a woman having sex with a man, non-binary, all kinds of different combinations, Ben. And it creates empathy in people. I don't buy that for a second, because you would have to be open to the experience to begin with, but sure, why not? Why not? And so Wade decides, as Samantha has a lot of reservations about this Oni technology, he's going to record their final ever meeting as a couple. where she's like, take that thing off, you fucking dick. And he's like, no, I'm not gonna. You're gonna wear it, and you're gonna see what an unreasonable dick you're being. And God,
are you gonna be okay?
I don't know. I don't know. Okay.
I can take over this part for you if you want.
So, okay, hold on. So he relives this every single day, over and over and over. She basically is like, hey, we need to know more information about this. Let's not roll it out. And Wade is like, yeah, but, like, your parents died. And this could have fixed that. This could have stopped the pandemic that killed your parents. Why do you hate your dead parents so much, you idiot? God, you haven't even put this on. You don't even know what it's like, man. And that's when Artemis decided she didn't love him anymore. But for some reason, she never moves on with her life. Wade, I can understand. He's a creepy loser weirdo who spends the first part of this book cyber-stalking her, looking at where she is, looking at her logs, that she doesn't even know he could do that. I think reading her private emails. Like, he's intensely cyber-stalking and invading her privacy this entire time.
Let me have a little quote here, because this is another thing I wanted to talk about. Just Ernest Cline painfully doesn't get it. Okay, so this is Wade talking about how he's cyber-stalking Artemis, and how we shouldn't judge him too harshly, because this book, by the way, is in universe Wade's autobiography.
I don't think that she ever read the first one, and she sure as shit did not read this one.
But trust me, there were far more twisted and depraved clips I could be playing back. The current top download in the NSFW section of the ONI Net library was a 50-person orgy, recorded simultaneously by all 50 participants, giving the viewer the ability to jump from one participant's body to the next at will, like some hedonistic demon.
Disgusting.
Cyber-stalking my ex-girlfriend at her public appearances seemed like a pretty tame pastime in comparison. So let me explain the difference between these two things to Ernest Cline, since he doesn't understand it.
Doesn't get it.
He doesn't get it. 50 consenting adults choosing to engage in an orgy and recording that experience for other consenting adults to watch is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it might not be your cup of tea, and I could see why, and it is kind of hedonistic.
The key word there is consent.
Yeah, it is kind of hedonistic, but you know what? That's their business, and they're not hurting anybody. And
you don't have to watch it if that's
if you don't like it, don't watch it. But you know the difference, though, with you cyber stalking your ex-girlfriend at her public appearances and voyeuristically viewing her in an obsessive manner, like, the reason that might creep her out is because she didn't go to those public appearances for you to obsess over her. Mm-hmm. She's not really consenting to the way you're using this material. And we also need to be a little bit honest about what we're doing here, because Later on, he will admit to not just stalking her public appearances. And you know what? Not just stalking her. He stalks everybody.
Yep.
He stalks all of his friends. He monitors their logins, their logouts. Information he is, like privileged information that he is using his position to access, and information that he himself does not have to record about himself. Let me read to you another interesting quote. This relates to the acquisition of IOI. So after Wade wins the contest in the first book, IOI was the one that was going up against him, and he worked for them briefly as an indentured servant. And they took him to court and argued that since he was indentured to them, when I won Halliday's contest, and so his fortune and his company should now be classified as IOI's property, because Wade was legally IOI's property. And since the U.S. legal system still insisted on giving corporations even more rights than its citizens, this idiotic lawsuit dragged on for months. The book will then go on in this chapter, and this is part of the 1-2 punch of contradictions. Ernest Cline apparently has a problem with corporations being people. But then Ernest Cline, through his avatar Wade, will go on to abuse his position as a private corporate leader to commit several what I think should be regulated and illegal acts, including, but not limited to, locking 10% of the world into a shared hallucination from which they may die. He can only get away with this. Wade can only live his life, and Wade commits numerous crimes and then lies about them in court. He can only do this because the government cares more about corporations than its citizens. But then, by the way,
who is the government because he's propping it up? But
who is the government? Yeah,
exactly. Who even is the government? What government is he propping up? If nuclear war and fucking land pirates are patrolling the countryside, I don't think there's a federal government left, Wade. I think it's probably you.
I gleefully zeroed out hundreds of trolls.
Yes.
If someone talked shit about me, I found them and killed their avatar. If someone posted something hateful about Artemis or her foundation, I killed them and their avatar. If someone posted a racist meme about H or a video attacking Shoto's work, I found them and killed their avatar. Usually right after I asked them the rhetorical question, who run Bartertown? I don't even get that reference. Eventually, people began to accuse me of being the untraceable, undetectable, ultra-powerful avatar behind the killings, and the resulting online media backlash, dubbed Parzivalgate, destroyed my public image. Thanks to my robes, there was no hard evidence against me, and of course, I denied everything. And my question to Wade is, why did you deny everything?
Yeah.
Is it even illegal? Technically, the Oasis is an unregulated video game that you
basically
own.
Yeah, you own
the CEO
Oasis.
of a private, not public, private organization. You could do this. I mean, you have to be able to do this because
and IOI, you basically have the most power and money of anyone in all of history.
It's not even that he could leverage his power and money to get away from something. Is he even getting away? Like, what's the crime?
Exactly. But I guess he wants people to like him, but it's like...
if you wanted people to like you, don't do it.
As we established, if you die in the game, that is a lot of money, real-world money, you could be losing. And he's going around killing you and potentially bankrupting you.
I could have afforded a real-life human therapist, of course, but I found it easier to share my most...
Oh my fucking God, I was so offended.
I found it easier to share my innermost thoughts with a computer program than with another person. A virtual therapist couldn't judge you or share secrets with its spouse. it wouldn't ever repeat anything I said to anyone. And that was the only sort of therapist I could bring myself to confide in. And why do I feel like Ernest Cline feels the same way?
Yeah.
If Wade is indeed neurodivergent, I would think it's very important for him to have a human therapist.
A
who can
real
help
therapist.
Him. Yeah.
Because he even admits that it's like Robin Williams, I think. And all he does is nod and say, go on.
I would have done mouth to mouth, but I don't find you that attractive.
And you know, everyone he's mentioning, except for Freud, who would be a bad modern-day therapist, everyone he
I don't
mentioned
know.
was
I don't know.
television.
I think a lot of Wade's problems stem from penis envy.
Okay, fair enough. But all the things he mentioned were television or film versions of therapists, and that is not what a therapist is, and that is not what a therapist does. And you're not going to get anything out of, here, try some breathing techniques, and keep telling me about your problems. Oh yes, go on. Oh yes, you're cyber-stalking your girlfriend and murdering people. Yes, go on. Tell me more.
I enjoyed that his cyber therapist said, "How is your social media addiction?" And Wade's like, "Those were his words." And it's like, has a therapist ever used the word addiction if the patient is not ready to admit they're addicted? Like, you could try to convince them that it is an addiction, but you wouldn't just talk right past the patient. If the patient is telling you, "I'm not addicted," you have to get them to admit they're addicted. Ernest Cline's never been to therapy, and he really needs to go.
But first of all, yes. But Wade admits he was addicted. His words in the first book and once in this book. He is addicted to the Oasis.
But
and
not
in
social
this
media.
book, he is addicted to the Oni, okay? He admits he has an addiction problem. And maybe that's what he should be seeing the therapist about. Maybe the therapist should be convincing him that he needs to see a real human therapist in person.
Maybe that fear of sharing your innermost human thoughts is the very reason you should be in therapy with a real person.
Yeah. So we should mention, Wade lives in like a 50-plus bedroom house all by himself. He's got security outside that are some human, some robots, and he talks to an AI, and that's it. He lives in an empty fucking mansion all by himself. And he has an addiction to the Oni because he will go into the Oasis for 12 hours a day, every single day. And he sees nothing wrong with this.
Well, he sees a lot wrong with it, as he's openly jealous of his friends who have lives, because H is getting married, and Shoto's already married and expecting a kid, and Artemis is jet-setting around the world, living a rock star life where she somehow hasn't found another boyfriend in 3 years. By the way, it's been 3 years. Skipped right over that.
It's been
a lot of potential
years.
story happened there.
It's been 3 years. They dated for 1 week. She found out he was an unreasonable, sociopathic asshole. And she didn't move on ever. Weird.
No. Which is it's especially weird because she doesn't seem to have any other friends, even though she hasn't been hanging out with any of them for 3 years, and she has a very, very active professional life.
Yeah.
You can't tell me in, like, the kind of social events that she must be going to, you can't tell me there isn't a man, woman, or whatever lieth betwixt there that Artemis finds more attractive than Wade.
Ben, you don't understand. Cline does not understand how we could fix the world. He thinks that you just put money into charity and you fly around looking at the devastation. That's all they seem to do. And it's like, you have enough money, you have the power of the entire internet at your disposal. You have more money than anyone ever on the planet, and you're basically the government. And you can't figure out how to fucking fix any problems ever? You're not even trying.
Here's the thing. I said in the first one, he knows that Artemis is the answer to the test. Like, he knows that's the answer the teacher's expecting. He should want to save humanity, but he doesn't. Just
No.
at the end of the day, he doesn't. He knows the answer you want and he'll give it to you. But he is going to, in his passive-aggressive, petulant little way, make sure you know that he's too cool for that. Because Wade says a bunch, and he says it the way I hate this when it happens in real life. The way that a lot of guys are like, oh yeah, well, my wife's probably right about that too, in a way that clearly indicates they don't care enough to fight about it, but they also don't think she's right.
Right. Yep.
And
Wade does that a lot.
all the time. And so Ernest Cline is this edgelordy little fuck who thinks that all this charity, all this nonsense doesn't do any good. You know, we'll throw money at it because that's what we're supposed to do, but it doesn't do any good. You know, we've been throwing money at charity. Tons of people have been throwing money at charity. There's hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars in charity, and it doesn't do anything. Where's the tangible results? So Artemis is going to go out there and she's going to do more charity. Well, you know what? She's not accomplishing anything. That's why I'm building my spaceship. And, like, the fact of the matter is, Wade, I don't believe you. I don't believe you would know if she was accomplishing anything.
Yeah.
Because you don't leave your house. And the people she might be helping are probably not questing on Lord of the Rings world. Like, they're probably in sub-Saharan Africa, and they don't know what the fuck that is. And if they did, they'd think you were a real loser for spending all your time there. And they'd be right.
This is Ernest Cline, just like the first book, justifying to himself and trying to justify to us, the reader, that his life was well spent. His obsession with 80s trivia was well spent. His desire to just escape the real world into video games and movies and just shut that out until the world eventually dies and him with it is well spent. Let's not do anything because we can't do anything. And
well, it's easily 100% less subtle in this one. Because he and H basically say that to Artemis.
Yeah.
They say to Artemis, you're some yuppie rich white girl who grew up in the suburbs of Vancouver. You have no idea what it's like to grow up poor. We don't need to justify our lack of empathy to you.
So,
a comforting distraction is the only thing that keeps us from shooting ourselves.
So first of all, I would say, if I were her, okay, because Cline, he writes Samantha as, oh yeah, she's morally righteous, but like, if I were her, I would say, here's a gun, guys. Go ahead and do it. If you guys die, I will get your shares, and I have a chance to actually help more. Because they do actually accomplish some things, Ben. They reestablish the rule of law with mechs, basically. Yeah.
I don't hate that argument that she is a relatively privileged person lecturing relatively.
Neither do I. But she
but
could pull out Ready Player One, which was an in-universe book, and say, Wade, you wrote about how your aunt and your friendly neighbor who is nothing but kind to you both blew the fuck up, and you did not give one single fuck, and you moved on.
I think the problem is Ernest Cline is Wade. You know, nobody's going to dispute that. I don't even think Ernest Cline's going to dispute that. He doesn't really know where Samantha's coming from. He writes that character not understanding it, and it's very apparent.
It feels very straw man-esque.
Yeah, because there is a thing where that person would hit back and point out that that was a fine excuse when you had no power.
Yes.
But now you are the most powerful people.
Yeah, you are literally the most powerful person on the entire planet. You could be doing so much more, but you've given up and you're building a stupid fucking rocket to fly not even to Mars like Elon Musk wants to do, but to another star system. That's
to
fucking
Alpha
dumb.
Centauri, where there may be an Earth-like planet that may be habitable.
You are going to
Guess
show
what?
up in that star system, and you are going to die as soon as you find that there's nothing out there.
There's room for 12 people on the ship, and you've wasted 1/4 of the slots available on yourselves, who have no survival skills, no science skills, no engineering skills. You're just dead fucking weight. And I would go one further and say there is no way on God's green earth that ship takes off with you on it. The engineers are going to leave you in space.
Thanks for the ride, idiots.
Absolutely.
You are such fucking morons. It's insane. There is no way humanity, and this is like public knowledge, by the way. They've been getting embryos from all over. It's not racist. It's not racist. There's a whole "we're not racist" plan where they've got embryos from every human culture and ethnicity.
Oh god, I skimmed over that.
And it's not racist, guys. It's really not. But
that wasn't even something I was going to level at him. You didn't need to bring that up.
Why? He didn't need to make it so only 12 people can go. He could have put thousands. It's a fictional spaceship that has no basis in reality. You're not building a generation ship that's going to get to Alpha Centauri in 40 years for a few $100 billion. You're not going to do that for a few $1 trillion. You have no clue what the fuck you're talking about. And that is just every level of this story. He has no idea.
He's also building the rocket in space.
You'd have to, because it's got to be fucking enormous. You'd never be able to launch it. He got that part right.
But the thing is, he's never done any test launches. Even Elon Musk has done test launches. That thing is going to explode as soon as you hit the ignition.
This is the thing. I'm willing to believe that he could build the ship. I don't really care about this part.
It's like you said
it's all
last
on
book.
you.
It's like you said last book. You think, and I agree with you, Ernest Cline thinks that this rocket ship idea is selfish, but he doesn't think that it's stupid. And it is.
It wouldn't be stupid if you could do it for a few $100 billion. I'll put it that way. You can't. The technology doesn't exist, and they haven't been making huge scientific breakthroughs in this world because the Oasis is the greatest technology, and you own it, and you'd know if they had. They haven't. And if you could do it for a few $100 billion, you could build 2 of them. You could build 3.
No, absolutely not. Nope. That's too many people.
It doesn't. Who's going to raise these embryos?
That was my thought. How are you going to,
You're going to be in your 70s by the time you reach this
place. Get those embryos into people. You know that there's a process for that, right?
Well, that's what I'm assuming he's developed.
Does he just thaw them? Does he just thaw them out and then they just grow?
Do you know?
You add a little bit of water and some sun, and it just grows
I did this.
to a person?
I did this with the last one. I'm going to do this right now. Hang on. Okay. Alpha Centauri is 4.37 light years from Earth.
Uh-huh.
So to get there in 43 years, which is about what he quoted, I guess he's saying he's traveling at what, 10% the speed of light?
Right.
No, you're not. Which is another frequent note I have in the book.
No, you're not.
Whenever he says something like, Wade, you're too stupid. Because this is the thing. If let's be real for a moment and say that somebody, let's say an 18-year-old kid inherits $400 billion in control of Apple or something. And he says, build me a giant generation spaceship. Here's $100 billion. Somebody said, okay.
Yeah, we'll
they're
get
gone.
Right on that.
Yeah, and they're fucking gone. It's just not possible. And again, Ernest Cline doesn't know that because Ernest Cline is one of the dumbest people I've ever encountered.
Well, let's get back to Wade and his super mansion, Ben, because there were a couple things I noted. He had his AI servant give him the news every day, but specifically, don't tell me about war, disease, or famine.
So he tells him the weather.
Yeah.
Laugh track. Play a laugh track.
They also, I probably won't remember to bring this up later, so I need to say that the phrase lovingly recreated in great detail, or variations thereof, come up about 1 billion times, and I hate it, okay?
If you lovingly recreate something, then there's probably no way the author would ever think you were a giant douchebag violating his copyright. Specifically not Tolkien. Tolkien was really cool with people reinterpreting his shit. He wasn't. If Tolkien heard Rivendell was in this book, I mean, like I said, it's a miracle you're not getting sued. If you filmed the first book, you wouldn't be able to, because the likeness of all those characters.
Well, that's why they had to change everything.
Yeah, that's why they had to change everything to stuff they could get the rights to. And I said in the first one, I'm not advocating for more copyright. I'm in favor of less copyright. But goddamn, guy, this is fan fiction.
Yes.
You should not be able to publish this as is.
Yeah, I read something and I 100% agree with it. It's that the fact that he was successful on the back of Ready Player One, and it is proof that we do not live in a meritocracy.
Oh, God, no. Did I write that? I feel like I said that. I said every book we read last year was better than Ready Player One and deserved Ready Player One's success more.
I think that this book is probably the worst thing we have ever read on the podcast. And that
I'm going to go ahead and say my immortal of legendary Harry Potter fanfiction fame deserves every penny of Ernest Cline's money.
So there's a lot of buildup, Ben, to...
No shit.
Oh, yeah. Wade. His charity is to give Oni headsets to the poor and downtrodden. So it's super great for that, buddy. It's going to turn out real well.
It's like religion. You got to get them when they're young.
Yeah. They build up to the meeting. All 4 founders get together. And Samantha is like, okay, so a lot of people are getting around that whole 12-hour limit and dying. And Wade's like, yeah, but we're protected from liability. It's like, I don't think that's the point I'm trying to make,
because
Wade,
the government cares more about corporations than its citizens. Yes, go on.
Yeah. And then she's like, hey, so the brain doesn't stop maturing until like age 25. And we don't know what the Oni does to your brain. So I'm proposing an age restriction. We don't give anyone the Oni unless they're 25 or older. And Wade has to bite his tongue to prevent from bringing up her dead grandmother and saying how the Oni allowed her to live inside the oasis as her cancer-ridden body died on her. And why
can
do
you imagine
hate your grandma, Samantha, you bitch? I can't believe that you would hate your own family. They must be so disappointed. Oh, wait, no, I can't say that. Instead, I'm going to roll my eyes at you. Everyone in the room groans, and they're like, yeah, we're going to vote that one down.
Nate, please, though, you're interpreting this all wrong.
Okay.
This is one of the few times I laughed out loud at the book. This is a comedic moment, and you're reading it wrong, and it's your fault
my bad.
for not
my
liking
bad.
it. Yeah, because what you need to imagine is Wade sitting there. Pretend he's not in an avatar. Pretend he's in his real body, having a real interaction with real people. And she goes, I'm proposing an age limit of 25. And there's this kid just sitting in this chair, biting his fist, going, you're dead fucking grandmother. No, I'm not going to say it. No, you know what? No, I'm not going to go there. Do my breathing techniques. I have her fucking brain in my computer. No. Just imagine him saying that under his breath, like, oh, you're dead, grandmother. That's the first thing he thinks
Yes, that is the first. That is exactly where he goes first. Like,
which is not at all what an addict would do. An addict definitely wouldn't jump to the most cutting thing they could think to say in response to any threat to their supply.
So yeah, Artemis is like, the Oni just makes it so you can ignore the world and let it fall apart, and then H is like, it's already falling apart, and then Wade is like, this might save us.
Well, no, and then Wade is like, you guys know we're not 25. You're just trying to kick me out of the Oasis. Can you imagine, Nate, putting a device on your fucking brain that locks your brain out of your body, and it's owned and distributed by people who aren't even 25 years old?
Can you? So that's another thing. Oh, I almost skipped over that, Ben, because he talks about his security bots in excruciating, exhausting detail, including talking about what model number he has. So when you're in the Oni, your body is completely locked out of your brain, so people could just come in and murder you, beat you up, rape you, whatever. They could do whatever to your body because you're not there to defend yourself. But don't worry, Wade has sold you a solution. It's a locker that you lock your body in that you can control to shoot people. We solved the problem that we introduced, and we sold it to you. But capitalism and corporations are bad. Remember that.
You know, this... So, they say it puts you into a lucid dream state, right? That's how it achieves the simulation.
Yeah.
You can just wake up from a dream.
Yeah, but you can't wake up from this without dying or going into a coma, Ben, so... If the Oni is jostled a little bit, you could have permanent brain damage.
Yeah. And they've
But don't worry, you can't
billions.
sue Wade for that, okay? Wade is completely exempt from selling this drug that can and will lobotomize you. And Artemis ends with the straw man, because they're like, oh, the Oni can cut down on pandemics and the overpopulation problem, and she's like, but at what cost? And Wade is like, you haven't even used an Oni. Checkmate.
Well, and that's Ernest Cline not understanding the Artemis position, because I would, rather than bring up her dead grandmother, I would probably point out, like H does, that emissions are down. We're meeting our climate goals. The pandemics are down. We've, managed to basically reduce humanity's consumption by making all their consumption digital. And that is quite simply something, if you're serious about saving the world, Artemis, that you can't overlook. Because I've heard people who are in the Artemis position make that argument about the COVID restrictions, that if, we reduced our usage by that much, we'd hit all the climate goals. Now, there's obviously huge complications to doing that, but those complications don't exist in the presence of this new technology. The theme is lost. The original theme was that the Oasis is causing people to ignore the world. And if they weren't in the Oasis, then they would be motivated to improve their situations. And they are not. And Ernest Cline...
At the end of the first movie, he goes, we're going to shut down the Oasis on, Tuesday and Wednesday or some shit like that so that we could go outside. It's like, someone got it. I mean, it's not a real solution. I don't think that would work. But it's like, you can do more than just
Well, here's
all
the
or
interesting...
nothing.
Here's the interesting thing. I'm on the Samantha side of this. More or less. I think Ernest Cline would definitely consider me a Samantha, because I think his spaceship idea is selfish and stupid. But I would not throw the Oni away. I would probably release it too. Now, I have concerns.
I would have done a limited release first, though. I don't think I would go, let's release it to everyone everywhere all at once. I think it's like, we don't know exactly how things are going to change. This has the potential to change, so many things about society and culture. We need to know more. And her concern about we could get brain damage for an undeveloped brain using this is valid, and they don't have anything. They just move on to a different subject saying, well, we got rid of the pandemic and everything. It's like, okay, but what about the whole children could be getting brain damage or developmental problems from this? You guys didn't address that. You just voted it down.
Well, that's all hand waved away by the fact that Halliday had a bunch of studies done beforehand. You know, Ernest Cline, again, this is one of those things I'm willing to give him. I'm willing to give you, if you say, this is the one thing I need you to accept. There's this headset. It's relatively safe to use. I did all the tests. Promise. I pinky promise I did all the tests, because that's basically what they said Halliday did. He funded all the trials, everything like that. In the real world, and, you know, this world where the government sometimes exists, where's the FDA? How does this get approval? How is it taxed? If all the business in the world is being conducted in the Oasis, and the Oasis is an American company, how in God's name did the United States ever go broke?
Well, because it got nuked, ? And then the Oasis... Again, Wade's the government. I don't think Ernest Cline realizes that, but Wade is basically the government. If he's paying money to prop the government up, he controls the government. Period.
Right. So, okay, so he gets his headset.
The government is there to rubber stamp his word, but he doesn't really seem to realize that.
Here's a recurring problem. I mentioned this before. Over-explain. He's over-explaining.
For 121 pages.
He needs some tension between Wade and Samantha, and Wade and Samantha, the tension before them was one thinks the Oasis is good, one thinks the Oasis is bad. It's more complicated than that now.
It's very black and white. There is no middle ground until you read the end, where it looks like there's a middle ground, but in fact Artemis is wrong. And you will see what I mean when you get there. I was fucking infuriated.
I know Artemis is wrong. Wade and Ernest Cline both hate Artemis. She is just the girl they want to sleep with. They do not respect her opinions. She's
the trophy girl he won at the end of the contest. And when things got real, they broke up within a week.
Wade is 100% gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss. That is his whole strategy. He tells Artemis she's stupid, she's wrong, she doesn't know what she's talking about, she hasn't even put on the Oni. He tells her that, you know, she's not even really good enough to be in this company if she's not going to do this or that or the other thing. We're all going to vote you down. All your ideas are stupid. And, you know, then he's in charge. Why is he in charge? He's not the sole heir to Halliday. He's just the one who's most like Halliday. And now we're probably going to try to argue that both he and Halliday are neurodivergent, though there is probably a good case that Halliday was.
I think Halliday for sure, but that doesn't excuse all the horrible, awful things Halliday did previously and in this very fucking book.
No,
go on.
And neurodivergence, it's offensive to try to make the case that a neurodivergent person can't tell the difference between right and wrong. There's a difference between not being able to interpret social cues and not being aware that you may have accidentally caused some offense or insult or inflicted some emotional harm, and then being told you did and still not caring. That's the difference.
He does that to Og, too.
Yeah.
He keeps asking about Og's dead wife. Oh, yeah, I guess we should talk about the plot. When enough Oni users come online, there's a new Easter egg hunt, this time for 7 siren shards, which refers to Kira Morrow. And so Wade pesters Og about his dead wife to the point Og has to shut Wade out of his life completely.
Yeah, and there's no way that Og didn't say, Wade, I am not going to help you with this, because here's the other thing. Here's the other thing. We're also smart, right? Is there any person who picks up this book, having read the first one, who reads, 10 pages into what the Oni is, and does not know what the siren shards represent? Is there a single person who is not going to guess where this is going? And why Og is not going to help you? The world's greatest puzzle solvers are not smart enough to put together what this might be, given all the clues they have.
It does take them a shockingly long time.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious what Halliday's doing. The 7 shards are somehow going to restore Kira's brain pattern that Halliday took and put in the Oasis, waiting for the technology to be ready. Og figured it out immediately, and he said, no,
"Stop."
I'm not going to help you resurrect a ghoulish digital zombie of my beloved wife. And Wade's refusal to respect that is one of the most disgusting things a human being could do. It's
He doesn't even need to do it. He was just like, I need to escape from my life, so I'm going to do another treasure hunt again.
Okay, so let's say he doesn't have the wherewithal to put together just how monstrous this is. He at the very least knows this is another Easter egg hunt put together by Halliday that is specifically about Ogden Morrow's wife, who both Ogden Morrow and Kira herself would have been deeply uncomfortable with him doing. This contest should be shut down. And let me tell you another thing. This is minor, but if you're going to over-explain every system in the story, I'm going to over-explain a few things back. One of the things I'm going to over-explain back is absolutely no one is going to work on this system with you constantly and flagrantly building in giant security risk backdoors that allow you to probably subvert numerous laws regarding tracking.
You could go invisible and go into private chats that are supposed to be secure. And we mentioned last time in Ready Player One that they could go into the competition's private chats and steal corporate information, apparently.
So Wade's movements in the Oasis are not logged. That's illegal. The Oasis is a bank. You can't do banking transactions that aren't logged. Somebody would demand these logs. Now, okay, you're propping up the U.S. government. You can do whatever you want, but then shut up. Then shut up and stop explaining it.
Exactly.
I was going to say, there's another one where he says, this is a little later in the game. We're going for like some, they specifically say Sword Art Online thing with these headsets where the headsets are going to go rogue and take control of the people's brains or whatever. And there's an offhanded remark that the person or entity who reprograms the headsets, they push it out in no known programming language. We can't reverse engineer it.
I saw that and I was like, oh, Ben's going to love this.
So let me tell you how reverse engineering a program works. This took not that long to Google. It's not a very difficult concept to grasp. So we all know code is ones and zeros at the end of the day, right? We all know that those ones and zeros represent, electrical signals that are sent to the hardware, right?
Yep.
So there's something called assembly language that is basically one-to-one relation to the ones and zeros. There are certain actions a computer is capable of performing. They are relatively simple, but when you arrange them in a complex way, they can do complex behavior like everything our computers do. But at the end of the day, it's just, sort of moving numbers around. You cannot write a program in a language other than assembly at the end of the day. Like, you have to get down to what the hardware recognizes. The hardware can only perform a certain number of operations. It is hardware. It is literally the chip.
Well, instead of using ones and zeros, he has twos in there now, Ben.
Ones and zeros everywhere. Ugh, and I thought I saw a 2.
That's essentially what they're
binary.
saying. You can look at the update, disassemble it to binary. He knew the word disassemble. That was good. You can disassemble it, but when you disassemble it to assembly language, which again is one-to-one with the binary, and you can see what the code is asking the hardware to do, and it would be incredibly tedious, but from that, with the aid of all your powerful AIs, you could probably backwards engineer the algorithm. I don't know if you could do it in 12 hours. That's a fair point, but it was a dumb thing to say. And you didn't need to say it. You didn't need to say any of that. It's just the reason I bring it up is because he went out of his way to say it. He's padding his page count with techno mumbo jumbo. And
yeah, if it sounds like we haven't done anything with this part, that's because the book doesn't do anything with this part.
No, this is a totally accurate representation.
This is the summary of part 1. This is legitimately, it's a bunch of meetings and talking about technology, and it goes on. I'm serious when I say it takes 121 pages for the villain to show up and give the hero his journey that he's going to be going on. I'm not making that up.
No,
I looked
all
at it.
of part 1 is the technical explanation of how the ONI headset works, how cool Wade's house is, what cars are in his garage, what toys he has, his alarm clock, which is the same alarm clock that Marty McFly had in Back to the Future, and it plays the same song at the same time as in the movie, and how Wade is going through...
He plays the Princess
passively.
Bride, and they just
he plays the
basically
Princess
steal
Bride. He goes
the
through
movie.
his Inigo Montoya. He just prints out the script for a few pages, like he did in the last one with whatever the fuck...
War games and whatever the fuck else he did.
And
yeah,
and it's just churning. It's just wasting time. And it's because he doesn't care. He does not give a shit about this book.
Because he knows that the screenwriter will come and they'll have to remove all of this anyway, and it's basically not even going to resemble this book. He's just here to get another movie with Daddy Spielberg.
Look, I'm going to say, I've been writing lately, again.
Oh my God.
When I write, I do put in little placeholder things where I might use a medical term or something. I might say like somebody broke a bone, and I move on real quick just because I'm trying to get it all on the page, because that's kind of what a first draft is. But then when you go back, you would be like, okay, now I need to make sure, I need to talk to my medical friend and make sure that breaking this bone would actually have this result. Because I care about my story and I don't want it to be bullshit.
Let me tell you, I've actually started going back through my draft, and a lot of the first draft is like Cline's writing, where it's this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. Because it's all just, okay, I need to get this on the paper. It helps me organize it in my head. Then I'm going to go back, and I'm going to inject, like, life into it, and I'm going to try to characterize these people better. I actually went back into my draft and said, I need to have more actual conversations, because right now it's just a bunch of this happened, this happened, this happened, and I need to characterize these people.
Well, and Neil Gaiman...
Cline did not seem to do that.
Neil Gaiman said in a couple of interviews, and I think his masterclass, that the first draft is you telling the story to yourself. It's not meant for anyone to see, except you. The second draft is you making you look like you knew what you were doing the whole time. And then that's when you start letting people see it, and then you do a third draft based on feedback and editing and stuff like that. And this is a first draft check for spelling. It's just, when you write, a good way to write, a lot of people get stuck on a blank page. They don't know what to write, and they stop, and it takes them forever because they take too long to get it perfect.
It's a momentum game. You gotta keep going, and you're gonna catch it on the next draft.
Yeah, and everyone's different. Now, maybe for you want to just write your novel in one go, but I think for a lot of people, the best advice I could give, if you give a shit about my writing advice, which you probably shouldn't, is just write it. Get it all out there. It's much easier to edit than it is to create. And this is just filled with things that should have been caught on a second draft. I could take, and I'm not joking, not exaggerating, I could take this 125-page first section down to 40 pages. It would lose none of the information that matters, and it would be better, and it would be 1,000 times more interesting and engaging. And I could do it in a weekend. I'm not joking. When I said this was going to be an attack on Ernest Cline. It is. This is a lazy slap in the face to the reader garbage pile he put out because he knew it would sell and he didn't care if you read it. He just needs to sell enough copies, which he very well may have based on the name Ready Player whatever, and then he might get his movie made. He does not give a fuck about this book, and it could not be more apparent.
Nope. Does not care one bit. Insert 80s noise here. Hey, it's Editor Nate. Real quick, I had to just cut this next section because we went on and on about the same point, and it was really mean specifically at Ernest Cline. The gist of it is Twitter exists in this world. Wade talks about how people on Twitter get into him, and they shouldn't because he has a great life and blah, blah, blah. It's clearly Ernest Cline having a fit at his Twitter reaction to his first book, and so he's talking about it here. And we concluded that, Ernest, you probably should let it get to you because you suck. But as I'm editing this, I will also say that Ernest is aware that the majority of the country, in his words, have a different value set than he does. And I think maybe, just maybe, he should use that as an excuse to look at himself and get some insight and determine why that might be and if that is a problem. That's all I'm going to say here until we get to closing thoughts. Editor Nate out.
Do you want to jump to the... I think we've done about all there is to do with part one, except maybe...
I want to talk about Lohengrin and the villain, and then we're done.
Yeah, okay.
So, Wade put out a bounty, $1 billion for anyone who could show him where the first shard was. It is met... this challenge is met by Lohengrin, someone who he has a crush on, and he also invades her chat and listens in on her and her friends talking, and they're called the Low Five, kind of like how they're the High Five, you know, H and Shoto and yeah, ha ha ha. And Low goes between a male avatar and a female avatar. So Wade decides to just look into her medical records and spy on her in real life, on her cameras, and, you know, all the normal stuff you do.
That dubious consent problem he has.
Yeah.
Ernest Cline doesn't realize that dubious consent is a big fucking problem.
So it turns out that Lohengrin was born male, but identifies as female.
Oh, wait, Nate. Oh my God. I just hurt my arm. I was just patting myself on the back so hard for not going into a gay panic that I think I broke it.
I think that's because Lohengrin is only in this book for 3 different parts, and one of those parts is Lohengrin, spoiler alert, fucking dying, just getting hit by a laser beam and just disintegrating. And Lohengrin has a more interesting plot than Wade, and we don't see it. And then Lohengrin dies. So
she's Ready Player 2. She's Ready Player 2. She's the one doing the quest. She should be the one engaging with Wade, who's become this corporate asshole.
Yes. Absolutely.
It's obvious. She's Ready Player 2.
It should have been about her.
You can redo the whole first story. You don't even have to write another book. You can just redo everything shot for shot with her as the main character and Wade as Halliday. It's the dumbest shit. It writes itself, and he's too stupid to listen to it.
So the whole point of Lohengrin is a big old pat on the back. But I think also people may have taken exception last time either to H being a black female, but for 95% of the last book, she was a white man. Or the fact that he brought up to Samantha, hey, I really hope that you're not a hairy man named Chuck, because that would really ruin my day. And then at the end of the book saying to her, it doesn't matter who you are because we knew each other. We knew each other with our minds and our souls through the internet, despite saying before the whole, if you were Chuck, I would be really turned off spiel. So I think this was a way to kind of be like, hey, I'm down with the trans people. See, one of them is in my book. And one major problem about Lohengrin is being trans and being a fangirl of Wade are the only two personality points that she has. There's nothing more to her, which is a problem. Because in real life, being gay or being trans is part of who you are, but it is not all of who you are.
Hey,
So what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say she got done better than Shoto.
Oh my god, yes.
She's a more
Yeah.
multifaceted character than Shoto.
Yeah.
What I was gonna
Yeah.
say is, of all his many flaws, Ernest Cline specifically, I do not think he is transphobic.
I don't
But-
think so either, but good God, he was bending over as hard as he possibly could to try to be like, guys, I'm not. See? I have a trans person in here.
I think he misses the point. I'm gonna give him a more maybe charitable interpretation. I don't think he necessarily cynically did this to try to market it to a more liberal crowd. I think he, like with H, making her, a gay black woman, I think he was trying to give some representation. Now making her a gay black woman who has to pretend to be a white man for most of the book is, again, like he missed the point. He doesn't understand that experience. He's chronically unable to imagine experiences outside of his own. And the same goes with, I forget her name, Lohengrin.
You could be forgiven for not remembering Lo's name because, again, she's only going to show up 3 times in this book to do very little and then die.
Well, I think the thing with Lo is Ernest Cline wanted to have this representation. He wanted to do a good thing. Again, he knows the answer to the test. He knows the answer is I should have more representation. What he doesn't know, like his whole life, is he stole the answers to the test and memorized them, but he can't show the work.
He doesn't understand. Again, in the last book, War Games is not a movie about cool hacker guy. The whole purpose of War Games is in its most famous quote. It just drove right past that in his stupid DeLorean.
He knows that it's not a big deal that Lo is trans. And her whole gender is called into question. One of the interesting things he does and then immediately throws away because he wasn't prepared to explore it is talks about, what is it, like theta gender or something, where it's people who now choose to only engage in sexual activity in the Oasis.
Yeah.
They will never use their physical body for sex. They only use their digital avatar. That's an interesting potential consequence of this technology that was somewhat realistic. And how would that change society? There's an interesting relationship with gender and sexuality that, again, he came so very close to exploring something interesting there. But Marty McFly's alarm clock, that's what we're here for. You care about Marty McFly's alarm clock, right? We talked about Shoto. Now Shoto doesn't even speak English on his own. He uses a machine-assisted translation. Despite, in Ernest Cline's own words, Shoto speaks fluent English,
Yes.
but chooses to use a translation device to erase any hint of his being Japanese.
He also stops the whole bowing and calling him Wade-san, all that stuff. Just
I said something.
Someone said that his portrayal of Shoto was really bad in the last book, so he decided, like, let's get rid of that by just turning Shoto into a different person.
I do another podcast. We've talked about it called That Time I Got Reincarnated in the Same World as an Anime Podcast or whatever. I did an episode on translation in that where I talked about how you have to balance in a good translation exotification with erasure. You want a person to be able to read your translation and understand it and relate to it, and that means you need to engage in some localization, which replaces Japanese cultural references sometimes with Western cultural references.
Like how Brock is giving us all donuts.
Jelly-filled donuts.
Sushi
Well,
balls.
and that's an example I used, actually, is that sometimes you can localize so hard that you just erase the fact that it is from Japan. You're not doing it just to get the point across, the author's point across. You're erasing the author's culture, which is what he did with Shoto. He overcorrected too far because he doesn't know how to make well-rounded human characters, and he does the same thing with H. H goes from being a private person who didn't want to engage with the world as a black woman, chose to engage with the world as a white man, to now I'm a billionaire and now I'm coming out as a gay black woman and I'm living as that and I'm changing my avatar to that and I'm fully embracing that. And maybe that is something she would have done, but he totally backtracked that too. He backtracked all of that. She's now...
Because this is a response to the response that he got for the first book.
Yeah, she's now H is publicly marrying her girlfriend, and she lives she's spent a lot of time in Africa. She's getting in touch with her cultural roots.
She goes to Africa immediately after winning the contest, and I was like,
yeah, she goes to Africa and Shoto leaves Japan. That's
yep,
in the same sweep. And I think Ernest Cline did want to bring in some gender and sex stuff with the ONI files because he knows, I think if the Oasis is the new internet, there's no denying that porn plays a perhaps outsized role in the internet. And why would that be any different in the Oasis, excepting for the fact that children go to school there? I think it's a lack of imagination. I think the whole thing's a lack of imagination.
Yeah, because again, we established he doesn't give a shit. So Lo gets the shard for him. He pays her $1 billion, and they go on their merry way. Also, did you know if you take a flower from Middle Earth and put it on Kira's grave in the simulation, a fucking limerick comes up? Thank you for turning her memorial into a fucking game, Halliday. I thought that was super awesome. So Wade relives a memory Kira had where Kira is 10 years old and just created her first digital artwork in school. I don't think that's actually super important, but the fact that he can relive this, oh my god, shock and awe, who knows, how did he possibly do this? So we're moving on. Suddenly, Wade wakes up, Ogden has been kidnapped, and also all the security in his house was shut off. He seemed to have just left, and then he went into the Oasis and grabbed 3 of the shards. That's weird. Also, Nolan Sorrento, the villain from the first book, he escaped death row somehow. I don't know why we have prisons in a lawless wasteland, but we gotta move on, okay?
What did he get, I guess, sentenced to death because he's apparently the only person
Yes, he was the only person, even
yeah.
though he actually had bosses at IOI who he reported to, an entire division of people who followed his commands. So, yeah, okay, whatever.
Which Wade knows and allows to happen.
Yeah.
Sorrento doesn't belong on death row. We know that, right? Do we agree on that?
Well, how do you even have a death row? Why do you have jails in this lawless wasteland? You just kick him out of the city and say, walk in that direction, you're kicked out of society, have fun with the roving gangs of pirates.
You just send him to the wall. Yeah, or just kill him. I mean, I guess he's on death row.
Yeah, you could also just kill him. You have an army of security robots that you can remotely control. And by the way, Wade invades Ogg's privacy again by uploading to a robot using some override bullshit that apparently GSS can do, and now Wade is inside of a robot inside of Ogden's house. That's a little fucking weird. I don't know if I want a less than 25-year-old sociopath who cyberstalks his girlfriend to be able to come into my house inside of one of my robots at any time he wants.
You know what I never thought about until we started talking about this is like the fact that Ogden did get those 3 shards. And so could you just imagine? And like, wouldn't it be great if like the person writing the book could have written one of the most emotionally complicated moments of the book where Ogden sees his wife's mind again for the first time and he's feeling a million conflicting emotions of
Ben,
you know,
the author
love,
can't even
nostalgia,
summon
wanting her
one
back.
emotion. How is he going
And
to
also-
get millions? Okay?
and also
It's not happening.
betrayal and horror at what Halliday has done that he has now confirmed. There was probably a little doubt in his mind that it was even possible, but now he's witnessing it
Ben,
and he
when you get to
knows
the end
the
of the book-
horror.
When you get to the end of the book, you're going to find out that Ogden knew all along. I'm not kidding.
Oh my.
Yeah. Yeah, he knew even back in the first book. So, yeah, emergency meeting time. We're all going to get together and we're going to roll our eyes at stupid Samantha again. But before we have a chance to call her a dumbass who hates her parents and who's a failure and, like, her grandmother hates her and whatever, in comes...
grandmother.
It looks like the guy who normally runs the meetings, who probably also runs the corporation for Wade because he's incompetent and can't do it himself. That guy steals the robes of Anorak, which gives Wade his god power, and he turns into Anorak, which is just Halliday, basically. And he is... I hate him. His dialogue is painful to read. He's a smarmy villain, and he says, hey, everyone, I use this latest firmware update to lock you in the Oni, and if you go, it's been established, if you go for longer than 12 hours, you're gonna die horribly as your brain is destroyed. And I have several million people locked in the Oni now who are gonna die if you don't get those shards for me, Wade. You've got 6 shards in 12 hours or you're gonna die. And let's think about this for a moment, because the last contest was 3 keys and 3 gates and took about 5 fucking years to complete. But here we are. It took 3 years for Wade to get that first shard. Now he's got 12 hours to get the remaining 6. Or he and millions of people are going to die. Also, Sonic.exe was referenced. Fuck you. Fuck you.
I
fuck you.
highlighted that. It's like, oh boy, man.
So here
Is
we are.
there okay.
That's the end of part
No.
1. Okay, 121 pages in, Anorak shows up to say, I'm going to kill a bunch of people unless you go on this quest to get the other shards. I believe in you. Okay, thanks. Bye. That's part 1. Nothing happened, pretty much.
No. You know, we do this little thing on Words About Books where we try to tailor the atmosphere of an episode to the book. So like with House of Leaves, we did a bunch of House of Leaves stuff. With Cecil H.H. Mills, we did a lot of the meta stuff. And with this, we had a boring passive-aggressive conversation about the details of a boring passive-aggressive book. And I could not be more proud of the way we truly encapsulated just the brain space one occupies when reading Ready Player 2 Part 1.
So yeah, final thoughts on this part, Ben. You haven't gone much into part 2 yet, but I could tell you it's exactly what you expect. You will get no surprises. And then there's part 3, which is like 4 or 5 chapters, the end.
I know what I'm getting into. When we did Ready Player 1, Ready Player 2 was already out. And so I think I've actually owned the book for quite some time.
Oh my god.
And I read bits and pieces of it. I flipped through it. I know what's going to happen. I wanted to read it because I'm fascinated by Ernest Cline. I wanted to read this. I'm making you read this.
Oh, can we call this your book pick then?
We can. You're the schedule meister. I wanted to read this because of all the books we've read, and we've read some ones we really liked and some ones we really didn't like. But even the ones we really didn't like, they never offended me. And granted, there were more offensive books than this, don't get me wrong. But Ernest Cline's worldview offends me. I disagree with his value system in about every way I can. And it's interesting considering how similar Ernest Cline and I kind of are. We even look similar, which is unfortunate.
I know. I think lightning might have struck you one day and you split.
And we separated. So yeah, there but for the grace of God go I. And maybe that's why he intrigues me so, this alternate Ben who, rather than becoming obsessed with douche philosophy and podcasting, became obsessed with the 80s. Poor choice. But it's not just the 80s anymore. Now it's also the early 90s and Sonic.exe. So there you go.
Hello, fellow kids.
It's interesting for somebody to try to create something out of less than nothing. And
I believe I said this book somehow had negative soul.
It does. I mean, it's all stories are created from, the ether. They come from your mind, and who knows how that idea got there. But like this, there's nothing in Ernest Cline's mind. It's just pop culture references. And he did kind of manage to cobble something together for Ready Player One. All his morality is wrong. All the lessons of the book are wrong. But he made it, and it worked, and it sold a bunch of copies, and you got Steven Spielberg to make a movie about it, and Will Wheaton to read it.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that I respect Will Wheaton less and less the more I know about him.
That's the correct response. I have to look. Let's see. Has there been any traction on the movie?
Well, it took like 9 years for the first movie or something like that. It took a long time. Oh, good. Cline plans to make Ready Player Zero.
The Halliday story?
I don't know. He said, I'll write that book too, which is more based on my own childhood. Growing up playing Dungeons and Dragons and video games as a kid. You already wrote that book about your childhood twice. 3 times, I think, if you count Armada.
Maybe you should write a book that's not about your childhood. Crazy thought. Maybe you should write a book that has nothing to fucking do with you. Crazy thought, I know. Yeah, it seems the only thing I can find is that Ready Player 2 is in the early stages of development, according to Ernest Cline. So I don't believe that. I believe they are certainly talking about it.
Wow, Wikipedia says Ready Player 2 had widely negative critical reception. I wouldn't...
It did.
Wow.
It did. Like I said, I know a lot of people who like the first one who do not like this one. So I don't think there's going to...
Because again, nothing
I'm not going to say...
You remember that? You remember this entire fucking episode where we just talked about the boring slog that is part 1 of this fucking book. And guess what? It doesn't get any better from here. Nothing happens. And I'm going to highlight the times where he tries to raise the stakes and it utterly falls flat. Because he doesn't know how, because he's a bad writer, and there's a reason he wasn't able to make it as a screenwriter, because he fucking sucks, and he never got better, and he never attempted to get better, I don't think. Because if he did, he would have gotten better. Even a little.
No, he got worse.
He got worse!
He cared less, and he got worse. He thought Ready Player 2 was a rubber stamp. They were just going to get that movie made. That's 100% what this is.
Yeah. And who cares what's in this book? Because he just needs to say, okay,
exactly.
Oni, Siren Shards, bad guys Anorak, and the screenwriter could fill in all the rest, like the dialogue, the characterization. They're going to cut most of the shit anyway, so, we'll make the screenwriter.
Yep, here's the outline, write a script.
Yeah.
Yep, here's the ideas.
Yeah. He's selling
that's
a shitty
exactly.
outline to his fans, which is
absolutely
pathetic.
Absolutely. I agree, but I read this purely out of curiosity for Ernest Cline. I do not know if anyone listening to this podcast, as usual, I have no idea why anyone listens to this podcast.
The opening page is what it's like to be stuck on a 4-hour flight next to a little kid who wants to tell you knock-knock jokes the whole time. Oh.
I read this book as if I were reading, as if Ernest Cline were telling it to me. And as I read it, the first one I was angry and it was cringy and awful. This one, I feel nothing but sad for this man, because I think I won't say never, because who knows, Hollywood, Netflix, there's so many people so hungry for content that something with this much name recognition probably can't go untouched forever. But I don't think this went the way he wanted it to. And I kind of feel bad for him. He deserves to fail. But I kind of feel bad for him. And every time I read this and it makes me cringe, I'm just like, oh, Ernest, no, you sad, angry little man.
So that's part 1. Join us next week.
Or don't. I wouldn't blame you.
No, do it. I had to read this book. You've got to listen to it, okay? That was the deal we made last year, and that's the deal that we're making this year. You, the reader, when you logged into this podcast, you signed the form that you probably didn't read. The end user agreement says that you are contractually obligated to listen to all 3 of these fucking episodes, no matter how.
You will now find that I have removed your stop button. The latest firmware update, which I call in firmware. That's a little joke no one's ever made before.
Oh, God.
You cannot stop. You must listen to all of the words about books until the mystery of why Ernest Cline writes is solved.
So yeah, next week we'll talk about his Pretty in Pink fan fiction. We'll talk about his Lord of the Rings weird. He read the Silmarillion, guys, kind of.
No,
or
he
he
didn't.
skimmed it. I think he skimmed it. I think he skimmed it pretty hard. And
I looked at those parts. No, he didn't.
And we could also talk about his love of Prince. And it's just gonna be so great. Golly gee, I can't wait to talk more about this goddamn book. So yeah, go ahead and hit us up on Twitter and at WAB Pod. We've got an Instagram where we're going to be mocking Ernest Cline probably for the next 3 weeks. Every episode that's released at Words About Books Pod. And you damn sure better be buying us coffee this time, because we had to fucking read this. We had to take notes on this. We had to slog through this. We had to digest this garbage. I had to put this into my brain, and it poisoned my mind. So please, for the love of God, buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/WABpod, and just tell me everything is going to be okay. Like, I need to know that things will be a little better when I have
this
to
is only
stop
part
this
1.
fucking book.
This is only part 1, and we've already recorded 2.5 hours. I don't.
I don't know
This
where
could
I'm
be
going to cut.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going to cut.
Oh, there's so much gold. It's all just like Ernest, right? Where do I find the room? Oh, Jesus. The end.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh my God, I love the 80s!